Every luxury watch boutique in the world is designed to make you feel like spending more means getting more. It does not. Today we are exposing 5 watch brands draining wallets without delivering value, and revealing 5 that actually earn their price tag. Number 1 might be the best $4,000 you spend all year. Number 10. Michael Kors watches are what happens when a handbag company discovers that watch cases are cheaper to stamp than leather bags. That oversized rose gold case with the embossed logo at 12 o'clock screams luxury from across the room. At $200 to $400, Michael Kors positions itself firmly in the aspirational gifting tier. Here is what Michael Kors hopes you never find out. That watch was almost certainly built by a mass manufacturer that also produces pieces for Tommy Hilfiger, Armani, DKNY, and a dozen other fashion labels. The logo changes, the factory does not. Inside that glamorous case sits a basic quartz movement that costs the manufacturer less than $5 to source, powering a watch that retails for $300. Run that math and it becomes offensive. You are paying a markup that would embarrass a used car dealer for a movement that a $15 Casio outperforms in accuracy and longevity. Enthusiasts consistently advise buyers to avoid fashion watches at all costs, pointing out that a Seiko or Citizen at the same price offers a real mechanical movement, better materials, and a case that will not pit and corrode within 2 years. When a fashion house treats watches as accessories rather than instruments, buyers become the product. You are not purchasing a timepiece, you are renting a logo. If that sounds bad at a few $100s, wait until you see what happens when the Medusa gets involved. Number 9. Versace watches take the fashion watch problem and dress it in Medusa heads and gold plating to charge you twice as much for the same insult. That iconic gold case with the Medusa medallion signals Italian luxury heritage before you check the price. At $300 to $800, Versace positions its watches alongside entry-level pieces from actual watchmakers like Tissot and Hamilton. Here is what Versace hopes you never notice. Underneath that theatrical case sits a cheap Swiss quartz movement, the same grade of caliber found in watches costing a fraction of the price. Tissot at $300 gives you a certified movement with documented accuracy standards. Versace at the same price gives you a movement that would not survive a real horological audit. Specialist reviewers are consistent. Versace watches are described as very overpriced relative to competitors in the same bracket, lacking the finishing, engineering, and serviceability found in brands that actually make watches for a living. On the secondary market, that verdict is delivered in numbers. Versace watches depreciate heavily because the collector community does not recognize the brand as a serious watchmaker. The Medusa stares back at you from the dial. The joke, unfortunately, is on the buyer. If fashion labels can overcharge this much, a so-called serious luxury brand should do better. But Hublot proves it often does not. Number 8. Hublot is what happens when a marketing department achieves total victory over a movement department. That angular black ceramic Big Bang case, with its exposed screws and carbon fiber texture, shouts avant-garde engineering before you check the price. From $6,000 to $30,000 for standard references, Hublot prices itself alongside Rolex and Omega, while claiming to occupy the same tier. Here is what Hublot hopes you never calculate. Its average price per watch sits dramatically higher than many established Swiss competitors. Yet the moment you walk out of the boutique, Hublot watches lose 30 to 50% of their value on the secondary market. Standard Big Bang pieces routinely sell for roughly half of retail pre-owned. The reason is simple. Hublot issues a relentless stream of limited edition collaborations with football clubs, celebrities, and luxury car brands. Too many variants chasing too few serious buyers means resale values stay permanently suppressed. You are paying Rolex money for a watch that behaves nothing like a Rolex on the secondary market. When a brand spends more on celebrity partnerships than movement development, the buyer absorbs the cost. If marketing can hollow out value at 5 figures, Graf shows how the term watch itself can almost vanish at 8 figures. Number 7. Graf is barely a watch company. It is a diamond house that occasionally embeds a movement inside a bracelet and calls it horology. The Graf hallucination is widely cited as the most expensive watch in the world, at approximately $60 million. The fascination comes in at roughly $43 million. Here is what Graf hopes you never ask. What are you actually paying for as a watch? The movements inside these pieces are not complicated horological masterworks. They are relatively simple calibers embedded inside an extraordinarily expensive diamond bracelet. The overwhelming majority of that $60 million is paying for carat weight, stone quality, and setting labor. The timekeeping function is largely incidental. From a pure watch perspective, the word hallucination is almost literal. The value is in the gemstones, not the gears. You could replace the movement with a cheap quartz module and the price would barely move, because the watch part was never the point. When jewelry becomes the product and timekeeping becomes the excuse, you are not buying a watch. You are buying the most expensive bracelet in human history. Once you accept that, it is easier to see what is really being sold by Richard Mille and Jacob & Co. Number 6. Richard Mille and Jacob & Co. represent the outer edge of what happens when exclusivity becomes the only real product. Pre-owned Richard Mille pieces rarely surface under $100,000. The RM5602 Tourbillon Sapphire trades at approximately $2.4 million. Jacob & Co. billionaire watches regularly exceed $1 million and climb into 8 figures for the most elaborate pieces. Both brands produce genuine technical innovation. Richard Mille cases use exotic materials and skeletonized architecture that can survive G-forces most watches would never see. Jacob & Co. builds miniature mechanical playgrounds with rotating planets, triple-axis tourbillons, and music boxes on the wrist. The engineering is impressive. The pricing is even more extreme. For any buyer not operating at ultra-high net worth levels, the value equation becomes impossible to justify. A Patek Philippe Grand Complication at a fraction of the price contains comparable horological engineering with a century of documented resale appreciation. You are paying primarily for brand theater and the exclusivity of owning something almost nobody else can afford. Impressive, expensive, and for 99% of buyers, a fundamentally broken value proposition. Those are the brands turning timekeeping into a very expensive magic trick. Now let us look at the ones that quietly respect both your wrist and your wallet. Number 5. Oris sits quietly in independent Swiss watchmaking, while the industry chases hype cycles and celebrity partnerships. At under $2,000, the Big Crown Pro Pilot Big Date delivers a genuinely serious mechanical movement from a brand that has produced nothing but mechanical timepieces since 1904. No quartz when it is convenient, no hybrid when margins allow. Mechanical, always, because that is the only standard the company holds itself to. Oris refuses the fashion playbook. There are no fragrance lines, no clothing collaborations, no celebrity ambassadors used to justify an extra $1,000 at retail. The value is in the movement, the case, and the bracelet. Enthusiast communities consistently rank Oris alongside Omega, Grand Seiko, and Tudor as brands delivering genuine horology rather than fashion-driven product. No influencer campaigns manufacturing credibility. Just a movement that rewards ownership, and a case that improves with wear. If you want to see what happens when that same philosophy is pushed to obsessive levels of finishing, you end up in Japan with Grand Seiko. Number 4. Grand Seiko is the watch the Swiss industry hopes you never discover. While fashion brands burn money on marketing, this Japanese manufacturer applies a level of hand finishing to its cases and dials that no Swiss brand at the same price point comes close to matching. That snowflake dial, hand-textured to capture the depth of freshly fallen snow, does not come from a machine. It comes from craftspeople at the Shizukuishi Watch Studio applying techniques that take years to master. The Zaratsu polishing process creates mirror-sharp case edges through individual hand finishing on each component. A Swiss brand at the same $2,000 to $8,000 price point would automate that process. Grand Seiko does not, because the finish is the product. The spring drive movement achieves accuracy of plus or minus 1 second per day, exceeding standard certification benchmarks through a mechanism that exists nowhere else in watchmaking. Collectors know that Grand Seiko does not yet match Rolex in resale performance, but they also know you are getting movement technology and finishing per dollar that embarrasses many Swiss competitors. Buying pre-owned pushes that value equation even further in your favor. That obscurity is your advantage. You're not paying for advertising budgets or Swiss address premiums. You're paying for handwork and movement engineering from a manufacturer confident enough to let the craft speak for itself. And if Grand Seiko is the connoisseur's choice, Tudor is the logical stepping stone into the orbit of the world's most powerful watch brand. Number 3. Tudor is what happens when Rolex decides to build a watch for people who understand exactly what they are buying. That black bay case carries unmistakable design DNA from the vintage Rolex Submariner references that professional divers trusted in the 1950s. At approximately $3,800, it is built by people who actually build Rolex. Tudor shares the same Hans Wilsdorf Foundation parent structure as Rolex, using movements developed in-house or sourced from the same supplier network. The construction standards, quality control processes, and heritage are adjacent to the Rolex standard, at a price that does not require a waiting list or a relationship with an authorized dealer. The market confirms the quality. Tudor Black Bay models represented approximately 15% of all mid-luxury segment sales in recent years, making them some of the best-selling watches in their category. Collector forums are consistent. Tudor is the rational entry point to serious watchmaking for anyone unwilling to pay the Rolex premium but unwilling to compromise on what is inside the case. You are not buying a budget Rolex. You are buying a serious watch from the same family. Once you understand Tudor, you start to see Omega not as Rolex light, but as a heavyweight in its own right. Number 2. Omega put a movement on the moon and on the wrist of every James Bond since 1995, and somehow avoided charging what that pedigree would justify. Pre-owned Omega watches appreciated approximately 27 to 28% over a recent 5-year secondary market window. Certain Speedmaster references now sell above retail on the gray market, something brands charging twice the price cannot consistently claim. Omega produces around 500,000 watches annually at an average price well below Rolex, while delivering movement finishing and case construction that rivals brands charging significantly more. The coaxial escapement reduces friction and extends service intervals beyond standard mechanical movements. The Seamaster and Speedmaster are not safe choices for people who do not know what they are buying. They are the correct choices for people who do. 2 centuries of Swiss manufacture, documented NASA certification, and a secondary market that consistently rewards patience make Omega one of the clearest examples of affordable luxury that still respects your money. For serious watchmaking at an honest price, this is where the conversation should have started. But there is still one brand that sits above even Omega in market power and value retention. Number 1. Rolex is the watch the entire industry has spent 70 years trying to replicate and consistently failing to match. Transaction data shows Rolex average prices increasing by more than 500% between 2010 and 2025. The Daytona reference 16500 Len retailed at approximately $13,000 and now trades near $30,000 on the secondary market. Rolex holds roughly a third of the entire Swiss luxury watch market by revenue, selling over 1 million units annually. This is market dominance. None of this is accidental. Rolex controls supply deliberately, maintains quality standards obsessively, and has spent decades building a secondary market that functions like a parallel financial instrument. No celebrity collaborations inflating price. No limited edition dilution undermining value. Just controlled production, consistent quality, and a collector base that has absorbed every economic cycle of the past half-century without abandoning the brand. Yes, that Hublot at the boutique can cost more per watch on average. The difference is that Rolex at $15,000 is a documented store of value. Hublot at $15,000 is an expensive way to fund depreciation. If you're ever standing in a boutique choosing between a watch with a celebrity endorsement and a watch with a 50-year resale record, the answer is almost always the one with the crown on the dial. This is not the flashiest watch in the case. It is the only one in the room that has already proven what it is worth. Next time you reach for that Hublot or Michael Kors because it looks the part, ask yourself one question. Does it actually hold its value better than a Tudor or Omega at the same price? It almost never does. Subscribe if this saved you money.